So the reason we decided not to date the daily planners is because in our experience, that's where people overprint or underprint. And so we wanted to give enough leeway that if you want to print all 30, that's great. But if you don't use one for a day or two, because honestly, you don't need it, you haven't printed out extra. So the suggestion there is to not print out all of them, all of the ones, and if you go that way, but just what I will say about the daily is some people really love the daily planner. Other people, once they start getting their days and weeks shaped right, need it less. So um, that's why they're not dated. The other reason they're not dated is because honestly, going through and redating all of them is quite an effort. And so we thought that it struck the balance between usability, between sustainability as far as overprinting or underprinting, and three, just making sure that we weren't suggesting that you have to print every, especially daily one. So Toby, that's the reasoning behind, or Sam, that's Samuel, that's the reason behind that. Alrighty, do we have any other major questions? Cheryl, that's your question. Cheryl's got a longer question. I think I'm going to pull that one for either a podcast or a Q&A if you don't mind, Cheryl. That's a great question that I want to make sure that's not rushed. Alrighty. So, Shannon, are we good for the day?
Just scrolling through again.
The only other, so if I were to do another walkthrough, I would love to have a walkthrough for someone who is not an entrepreneur owner. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but just so that we can see how to do this in the context of someone who is employed and maybe they're using it at work where they don't necessarily get to set all of the objectives. So if there's someone on the horn that is in that situation, I would love to hear from you because that's a different sort of planning factor there. Um, I do have some good questions while that's coming up. So, Cheryl, I'll answer your question about the about the so our question is on the annual, what is the empty space below the Q objectives again? So let me scroll back up. Um, so she's saying, what is the empty space below the quarterly objectives again? Road mapping. And so this is, you can have a little Gantt chart. So if you wanted to draw out that, for instance, on this launch website, you think it's going to be March, April, and May, you can just sort of draw that in there and you can kind of see it in a waterfall way. It's hard to see showing this. We're going to be developing a lot more assets for the planners, guys. This call has been getting it out there so you have what you need right now. But as we see what the questions are and the better ways to answer them, we'll create more. But that's just so that you can create roadmaps right in the planner itself. And it's really easy to see when you've got things going, over multiple quarters. The other thing that you can do is, for instance, if you know you're going to be out in July, you can just scratch out, July so that you know that that's not there, and you can plan your projects around that. So that's what we're looking at there too. Is this is basically your tool in this middle here to get a better visual scape of the year because I realize there's a lot of text, there's a lot of spreadsheet looking things on here, and sometimes drawing it out is just really useful. A pro tip here, by the way, is if you're writing and you're filling out these roadmaps, is actually to use different colored pencils. So that way, launch website might be blue, and you can just write everything in blue if you're writing in pen. And this is really easy to see at a glance where things are, and it taps into the part of our brains that process visual information in color a lot better. So I have a great. Oh, I don't know that I need to answer that. Any open question? I have Toby T that asks, can you speak to the values, themes, and challenges, please? Thanks for that question, Toby. What we wanted to do with that particular block is give you a space to put what your values are, in the sense of you might be looking at instantiating a value like compassion for the year. Well, if that's really important to you, then put it on there and say, cultivating compassion. Or maybe that's finding balance. I'm looking at you, Nadia, if you're on the call, right? Finding balance might be a value that that you have on there that we put at the top level, so that as you're making your quarterly plans, for instance, if it was finding balance and you get down here and like all your work plans, you're like, ah, crap, I need more quarter objectives. I can't do this. Maybe that's a sign that you're not really practicing finding balance, right? Not saying it definitively that. Also, if you have challenges like, poor cash flow, I'm thinking of business or something like that, you might put that challenge there so that as you're making your goals, you can say like, am I actually implementing that? Am I actually doing something about that, right? So it's just a place that helps us go from aspirations and challenges that we mentioned to actually strategies that help us instantiate our values, our themes, and to address our challenges. You don't have to use that block for anything. I'm going to be writing more about that, Toby T. But I wanted to make room on the planner itself so that people can find that. And when you come back, because when you think about it, when you do, say, your monthly planning, a best practice here is to look at your quarterly planner, but also look at your annual planners and say, where am I based on these things? And then you can look from top down and say, you know what, I'm doing pretty well there, but I'm still not, say, finding balance. And this is the month where I'm going to do that and get it in there. So that's what that is, Toby. I hope that helps. I mentioned something offhand too that I wanted to slide in. I mentioned that there were creative blocks that roughly lined up with. So let me go down to the weekly. So if you look at the daily project planner, remember this is the only level where we go down that deep, right? Where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, and I said that creative blocks are for most people aligned with higher energy levels, right? So you might say that this task is a creative task and it requires a higher energy level, and you might know that, say, at 9 o'clock here, that's a high energy level for you, and so you put that in there and you make sure that you line these up. It's kind of like the sorter. Remember the kindergarten game where you put the triangle in the triangle hole and the square and the circle in the square hole, or the circle in the circle hole? You make sure that you line up these tasks with the type of energy that you have, right? And so you might say, oh, that's a social one. I can line it up there. So that's how you could use these areas here to really make sure that you're working on the right things at the right time. And if you look at a bunch of tasks and it requires a bunch of 4 energy levels, but you look and you see that you don't have that many, that's a clear sign that you've got more circles that you need to get into holes than you're ever going to be able to get in there. So you need to rethink how you're going to do that, which might mean punting to another day. It might mean really looking at if there's ways you could streamline things or do it faster. But at the end of the day, I want you guys to remember, you can't fit 14 units of stuff in a 10-unit bag. It just doesn't work. And so if you're trying to get too much in there, the more humane thing to do is to make the decision at the beginning of the day or when you do your 10-15 split and say, you know what, there's another post, Jess, if you want to grab it, it's the work at 85% capacity with 100% focus. It's like I'm going to allocate 85% of my day so that I have enough slack and margin, but I'm going to be super focused during that time. A lot of times we make the mistake that allocation and focus are tied together, but you can be really under allocated and hyper focused, and that's where a lot of our growth is going to come from. So there's a post that Jess is going to pop in there real quick to help with that. There you go. She's already got it in there. Alrighty, everybody. I appreciate you hanging out additional time with me. We're going to have a lot more resources coming in, so please let me know, or please let us know what we can do to support you in helping get your momentum at. As you can tell, I love what I do. I love that we're able to create these tools for you because, I was at a speaking event here recently. Um, and someone asked me, like, Charlie, what keeps you going? Like, why do you do all this stuff? And at the end of the day, I'm not super jazzed by when people have the epiphany of a great idea. That's not my thing. My thing is when people start getting the confidence, and that happens when you start getting the work done and you start getting excited. That gets me excited. But what really gets me excited is when people look at it and say, I've done that. I've done that. I put it on the paper, right? I said this is what we're going to get done in quarter 1, and we got it done. I said this is what we were going to do this year, and we got it done. And there are a bunch of wonderful surprises that happened. That's what really keeps my creative fire going. So keep sending the questions. Keep helping us make the product better because of your questions throughout the years over nearly the last decade, guys. We're able to put out what I believe is the best version of our planners yet. They're, but nothing is perfected and created at the same time, and we're going to keep iterating and keep iterating and in the ways that we can to make it successful for you. This recording will be sent out as soon as it's encoded and everything like that. We'll also send some of the helpful links. Thanks so much for spending time with me on this wonderful, I believe it's a Wednesday. I'm going to say it's Wednesday because that sounds right. Um, Here's the thing. Remember that planning is really an awareness generating process. It's not a straitjacket. And if you're planning effectively, you're always going to be changing those plans. Um, Stick with it, do the work, ship it, and stand tall. See you guys.